Hey there, today's video is all about golf access homes for sale in the city of Cape Coral. The city of Cape Coral is extremely well known for our golf access real estate. And what I mean by golf access is basically a single family home on a body of water. It's usually a canal, a saltwater canal, that offers boating access out to the Gulf. So you can keep your boat right behind your house, get out, go fishing, go to the beaches, all of that great stuff. We've got over 400 miles of canals here in the city of Cape Coral, and most of them are golf access homes. So in today's video, I'm really going to break down the numbers for golf access real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. We're going to take a dive into some of the different areas, and I'm really going to break down what the sales numbers look like for these properties right now. So if you're looking for a golf access home for sale here in Cape Coral, maybe you're considering buying a property and moving to Cape Coral, or even if you have a golf access home that you're thinking about selling right now in the city, this is going to be a very important video for you. It's not going to be particularly entertaining, but I'm going to give you a lot of really solid information, solid background on the numbers of what the golf access home market looks like. So make sure you stick around. We're going to cover the different areas and really dive deep into the numbers on this one. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a near 20-year full-time real estate broker here in the city of Cape Coral. I live here in the northwest section of Cape Coral with my wife and our 3 little kids, and I do a video like this every single week on this channel. Today we're diving into some numbers, and I usually do a monthly market report on the entire real estate market for Cape Coral, but usually these weekly videos we're just either looking at some really interesting property, or I'm giving you some really solid information you can use if you are moving to the city of Cape Coral. So if you are moving here, or even if you're moving to Fort Myers or something, or even if you live here now and you just kind of want to keep up to speed on all the latest and greatest information, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be around for these videos every single week. I promise you'll get a lot of really great stuff out of it. And if you are in the market, either buying or selling a property here, get a hold of me. There's nobody that's going to work harder for you than I will in this real estate market, and I really enjoy helping the people that watch this channel out. So you can call, text, or email me anytime. Contact information's right there on the screen, and it's also down in the description of this video. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start out by kind of describing some of the different areas we're going to be talking about in today's video. There's basically 3 main areas that offer golf access real estate in the city of Cape Coral. Let's talk about those. All right, so if you're not familiar with the city of Cape Coral, our city is divided into 4 quadrants, and if you've seen an address, a Cape Coral address, usually they have one of these quadrants listed as the prefix for the street name. So you've got the southeast, the southwest, and then you have the northeast and the northwest. That divides the city into 4 different quadrants. Now, the southeast and the southwest and the northwest are the only 3 quadrants that offer golf access real estate. You can find a lot of canal homes up in the northeast section of the city, but they're all going to be freshwater homes. They're all landlocked, and they've got a lot of little nice lakes and things like that to them up there, but they're not going to be able to get boating access out to open water that way. So we're going to be focusing on the southeast, the southwest, and the northwest, and each one of these areas really has some different pros and cons to them. Obviously, you get out to open water a little bit differently in each one of these sections. In the southeast, you kind of get out a little bit further up the Caloosahatchee River. The southwest, you get out a little bit closer to the mouth of the Caloosahatchee River. And then the northwest, you're getting out into Matlacha Pass. So a little bit different in terms of the locations. It's also a little bit different in the ages of the average home that you're going to find. So in the southeast, most of those homes, the southeast was the first area to be developed back starting in the late 50s and early 60s. And as such, most of the homes there are a little bit older. A lot of them were built in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then if you go over to the southwest, those properties are going to be a little bit newer. A lot of those homes have maybe been built since the year 2000, so a little bit newer property. You find a lot newer infrastructure over there, newer commercial developments and things like that. We've got the nice areas like Tarpon Point and Cape Harbor down there in the extreme southwest. And then if you go up to the northwest, that's really the newest area. It's the most up-and-coming area of the city, and most of the homes up there, particularly golf access homes, have really been built in the last 10 years or so. It's undergone a tremendous growth in development up there. Once again, a ton of commercial new construction properties are going in there, like the 7 Islands project and Coral Grove and a lot of other really exciting things. So that's kind of the newest area up there, and as such, in these all different areas, obviously the pricing is going to be a little bit different. So now I want to kind of break things down into what the real estate market has looked like for the last few years in each one of these quadrants. So let's go ahead and start out by talking about the southeast section of the city. All right, it's time to dive into the numbers of the Gulf Access home market here in the city of Cape Coral. I'm going to follow a little bit of a pattern that I use on my monthly Cape Coral real estate market, where we really cover the entire real estate market, including Gulf Access homes. But in today's video, we're really focusing on Gulf Access single-family homes. So I'm going to start off by showing you a graph of what the number of monthly sales look like for this category of property just in the Southeast. So again, we're just talking about the Southeast section of Cape Coral. Basically, the dividing line is south of Pine Island Road and east of Santa Barbara Boulevard. I've shown you that on the map there, but let's start off with the number of sales in this area over the last couple of years, broken down by month. Here's the graph. So the latest numbers that we have is from February 2026. We sold 39 Gulf Access homes in this area of the city this past month. That's up from January's number of 29, and that's actually been a really strong couple of first months right now. If you kind of look back in the January and February realm on the last couple of years, you know, January and February of 2025, we only sold 50 properties in those 2 months, 23 in January, 27 in February. If you go back to 2024, it was 21 in January of 2024 and 28 in February. It was 49 properties. So, you know, we're doing quite a bit more sales so far this year in the first 2 months than we did in the last 2 years. It's actually about 36% more than 2025's number, a little bit more than that than 2024. And really our months kind of ramp up as we get into March, April, and May. April, and May, as you can tell in this graph, are really our strongest months that we have for this category of real estate in the city. But let's kind of talk about the history here and the totals for the last few years. Comparing the last few years, you know, 2025, we actually had a stronger year for Gulf Access real estate overall in the Southeast and in these other locations, as we'll get into in a minute. But 2025, we sold a total of 387 Gulf Access homes in the Southeast Cape. And you want to compare that to 2024's number. We had only sold 372 in 24 and 377 back in 2023. So we're up about 4% in 2025 versus 2024. So we're having some momentum in terms of the number of total sales that we've seen, at least last year. And I fully expect, as we've seen on that first graph, that you know, we've started off strong 2026 for this category of real estate, and I fully expect that we'll probably sell a fair number more properties, Gulf Access properties, in 2026 than even 2025. But I mentioned that the Southeast section of Cape Coral, the homes, especially the Gulf Access homes, are usually just a little bit older. And so out of these 387 sales for Gulf Access homes in the Southeast last year, only 57 were 20 years or newer, 20 years old or newer. So most of them were older than 20 years, and in fact, 68% of them were 40 years old or older. So most of these properties, again, were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We just have a little bit older of a real estate product in the Southeast because that area, again, was developed before anything else. And that kind of affects the values, and that's kind of what I want to talk about next. So again, we're talking about the Southeast section of Cape Coral. Let's look at the numbers. This is the median price for these Gulf Access single-family homes. Again, this is the 2-year graph going back to January 2024. So February's number was $612,500. That's the median price for Gulf Access real estate, for Gulf Access single-family homes in the Southeast section of Cape Coral. That's down ever so slightly from January's number of $615,000. But again, we don't have a lot, you know, a very big sample size in each one of these months, which is why you kind of see that number kind of spike up and down a little bit. So you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit. But let's just take the number from last year. Last year's median price in February of 2025 was $608,000. So we're roughly the same as we were last year. We're actually up $4,500, or about 0.7%. Now, if you go back 2 years ago to February of 2024, that number was $662,000. So we're down almost $50,000, about 7.5% from where we were 2 years ago. But you kind of, again, have to read between the lines on this, and that's why I want to show you kind of what the yearly graph looks like from when our real estate market peaked. Our real estate market kind of got really hot and heavy there after the year 2020, after the pandemic, and it kind of peaked out in 2022, and then it's been correcting really ever since then. We've had a couple of hurricanes there that kind of It kind of put us on the back burner a little bit, but nevertheless, 2022 was kind of the high watermark for our prices, especially for this type of real estate. So let's look at the median price over the course of the last few years, the entire year. You look at 2022, the median price for the Southeast for Gulf Access single-family homes was $749,000. And then it took a big dip in 2023. Remember, we had Hurricane Ian there in late 2022, so we were dealing with that. And in 2023, we saw a few more storm-damaged homes sell that year, so I think that kind of pulled the price down a little bit, on top of the fact that we were in a little bit of correcting market at that point. So the median price for 2023 actually went down to $675, and then it continued to fall in 2024 to $655. And last year in 2025, the median price for the Southeast section of Cape Coral for Gulf Access single-family homes got under $600,000. It was $599,990, just under $600,000. So if we want to look at the correction that's happened since that peak in 2022 when it was $749,000, the average Gulf Access home price in the Southeast has come down $149,000, or just under 20% in just the last 4 years or so. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've seen not only a correcting housing market a little bit, but we've had some, higher insurance figures. The insurance costs have gone up a little bit, and all of that kind of gets priced out into the market. And especially when we're talking about the Southeast, as you're going to see as we get into these other quadrants with newer properties, we've seen a little bit more exaggerated decline in overall median sale values for the older properties. Again, because I think it's just a little bit more expensive to insure an older property versus a newer property, and that all has to get priced out one way or the other. But the Southeast is definitely the most affordable section of the city for Gulf Access real estate right now, and especially it's just mainly because these homes are older. Some of them are a little bit smaller. They don't have as many bells and whistles and things like that. And so the Southeast is where you're going to find the majority of the properties that are under that $700,000 mark, $600,000 mark in some cases. So I thought that was pretty interesting. We've corrected almost 20% from the high point in 2022. But let's look at the inventory. The inventory has been a very interesting situation for the entire real estate market. But these are the inventory figures. These are the number of active properties that were on the market in any given month over the course of the last 2 or so years. This graph actually goes back to January. So this doesn't mean there were this many properties on the market at one time. It just means at one point or another during the month there was an active status. So some of them sold, some of them expired, some of them came off the market, things like that. So these numbers are the total number of actives that were on the market that month at some point or another. Here's the graph. So February of 2026, this last month, we had 319 Gulf Access homes in the Southeast on the market. That's up very slightly from January's number of 299. We see a seasonal bump, especially for this category of real estate, every single year. So as we come from December to January to February, we usually see it in any market situation. We always see the number of available properties kind of tick up as we get into our main buying season, especially for Gulf Access homes. So it makes sense that we've kind of crept up. But if you look at, it compared to especially last year, we didn't really see the big rise that we did last year. Last year, the numbers went up significantly. The number of available properties on the market got all the way up February of last year. In fact, there were 440. So we're 121 fewer properties on the market right now than we were this time last year. That represents a decrease in inventory of about 27.5%. So a significant number of properties have come off the market in the last 12 months. And really, a lot of that reduction just happened, in the first few months of the summer last year. So we're at 319 right now in February 2026. Even if you take it 2 years ago, back to February 2024, that number is 363. So we've got 44 fewer now than we did 2 years ago. So we're still down 12.1% from February of 2024, when not as many people were talking about us having an inventory issue. So I think that's very interesting. We've taken a lot of inventory off the market. It's come up a little bit here in the last few months, but it just does that really always here. We're a very seasonal area of the country, and we sell a lot more, especially Gulf Access homes, in the first 6 months of the year. So we always see a few more properties on the market this time of year. But I'm fully expect that to flatten off and then start to go back down again. So for all intents and purposes, These are numbers specifically for the Southeast, but in terms of the entire real estate market, really all signs point to this particular market cycle kind of bottoming out and making a very slow gradual turn in the other direction. But that's the numbers as they look for the Southeast section of Cape Coral. Let's jump over to the Southwest and see what the market's been doing over in the Southwest. All right, so the Southwest section of Cape Coral, what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the Southwest, again, is mainly the dividing line I'm using for the purposes of this video is we're south of Pine Island Road and west of Santa Barbara Boulevard. So that southwest corner of the city, this is where you can find a lot newer properties versus the Southeast. Southeast, most of the homes are the 60s, 1970s, 1980s. Southwest, especially the further west you go, really the newer the properties get. So we saw that development kind of move western, really towards about after the year 2000. A lot of the homes there were built since the year 2000. You see, especially in the eastern border of the Southwest, you see a few older properties, maybe 1980s, 1990s, but the further west you get, you definitely see newer properties. And there was a lot of building that happened in that boom that we had after the year 2000, mid-2000s, basically 2004 and 5. Before the financial crisis of 2008 hit. So I'm going to follow a similar pattern with what I just did in the Southeast, and we'll start out with the total number of sales, and this first graph goes back 2 years, the monthly number of sales of Gulf Access homes in the Southwest section of Cape Coral. Total number we saw sell in the Southwest last month in February was 47. That's up significantly from January's number of 32, but again, you compare January and February of this year compared to the January and February of the last 2 years, and we're up significantly in terms of the number of sales that we're seeing for this type of real estate. So for instance, in January and February of 2025, we only sold 30 properties, 12 in January and 18 in February. So we're talking 79 in January and February this year, only 30 in January and February of last year. And even going back to January and February of 2024, we sold 71 properties in this area of the city. So you're talking significantly more now, at least in the first 2 months of the year, than the last 2 years. And actually, January and February this year compared to January and February last year, we've seen a 163% increase in activity in terms of the total number of sales for Gulf Access single-family homes in the Southwest. So a lot of momentum, especially in the Southwest, and especially compared to the last couple of years. But let's just look at the totals over the last few years. Last year in this location of the city, we sold 389 Gulf Access homes, and that's actually up 4.5% from 2024's number. We had 369 total properties, total Gulf Access homes sell in the Southwest in 2024, and even fewer in 2023, 347. So we're doing a lot better, especially considering we've got the first 2 months of the year, we've got, we're much higher than we were last year. So I fully expect 2026, as this momentum continues, we're going to see more of these homes sell in 2026 than even 2025. And 2025 was a pretty good year for Gulf Access homes in terms of the total number of sales that we had. But I mentioned, the Southwest, you're just seeing some newer properties. And actually, of those 389 sales last year, 122 of them, or about 31.4%, were 20 years old or newer, so 2006 built or newer. So roughly a third of the market is newer homes. That's just why I say you go to the Southeast and most of those homes are over 40 years old. You go to the Southwest and a lot of them are much newer properties. And actually 40 years or older represented only about 14% of the market for Gulf Access homes in the Southwest. So a lot newer properties, and as a result, we usually see home values, especially for Gulf Access homes in the Southwest, are significantly higher than the Southeast. And let's get into that right now by talking about the median price. So here's the Gulf Access median price, the Gulf Access single-family home median price for the Southwest section of the city, the monthly median price over the course of the last 2 years or so. Here's the graph. $790,000 was the median Gulf Access home price in February of 2026 in the Southwest section of the city. That's up a little bit from January's number of $759,500. And again, we don't have a big sample size in any given month, especially since we're breaking this down into these little quadrants. So it goes up and down quite a bit, and you kind of have to read a little bit between the lines, because if you go back to February of 2025, the median price for this area of the city for Gulf access homes was over $1 million. It was $1,042,500. So it spikes up and down quite a bit, and so you kind of have to take it almost as a whole over the course of the entire year to kind of figure out where these values are moving. 2 years ago in February of 2023, February 2024, the median price was $880,000. But let's look at the overall median for the last number of years. And again, this type of real estate peaked out price-wise in 2022, and then we've been really correcting ever since 2022. And so let's take a look at this graph. This is the median price over the course of the last few years. So it takes consideration all of those 380 some sales last year. What's the median price of those for 2025? And this is what it looks like. 2022's number in this area for Gulf access homes in the Southwest, 2022 we peaked out at $905,000 for that year. And then of course we had Hurricane Ian in September of 2022, so that kind of put a dampener in 2023 on some home values, because there wasn't as much damaged homes in the Southwest versus the Southeast. We didn't see too many hurricane damaged homes in the Southwest, at least flood wise. So it's a little bit muted in the Southwest versus the Southeast, down in that yacht club neighborhood where those 1960s and 70s homes were built to those lower elevations. We saw more flood damage in that southeastern location versus the Southwest with newer properties that didn't see as much flood damage. So it wasn't quite as much, but we did notice a big drop off from 2022 to 2023, and a lot of that again had to do with some of that storm damage that happened. So in 2022, again, we were at 905. We went down to 840 in 2023 for a median Gulf access home price. And then it bumped up a little bit, actually, in 2024 to 855. That's why I say I think if we hadn't had that hurricane at the end of 2022, 2023's number would have been probably closer to the mid to upper 800s. We've really, in the entire market, we've seen kind of a stair-step, slow downward trajectory for pricing over the last 4 or so years. So I think that was a little bit of an anomalous year in 2023 with some of those storm damaged properties. So we went from 840 in 23, 855 bumped up in 2024, and then it dropped down in 2025 to just under 800,000. 799,800 was the total median price for Gulf access homes in the Southwest last year. And that represents about 11.6%. We had about 11.6% reduction from 2022's high point to 2025's median price of just under 800,000. It represents about $105,000 reduction in the average Gulf access home price over the course of the last 4 years. So not as significant as we saw, again, over in the Southeast. Southeast, the correction was closer to 20%, almost 20% exactly. 11.6%. We didn't see the correction as much in the Southwest versus the Southeast. And I think that entirely has to do with the fact that the older properties in the Southeast, a little bit more expensive to insure those older properties. Maybe some of them had some older roofs, older windows. Some of them in the flood zone, the flood insurance is a little bit higher on those older properties versus the newer properties in the Southwest. So we didn't have to price out as much of a difference in the total carrying costs for homes in the Southwest versus the Southeast. And so as such, we didn't really see as big of a correction over the course of the last 4 years in the Southwest versus the Southeast. And keep in mind too, that was an 11.6% correction. That doesn't take into consideration the inflation numbers since 2022. We've had some pretty high inflation numbers. We've had the government's data that they've released. But honestly, I think a lot of people would agree that those inflation figures that the government releases are probably considerably less than what the actual inflation amount has been. So you take into consideration that real estate generally keeps pace with inflation. Now we're talking pricing has gone down 11.6%. We may have had as much as 15 or 20% of inflation in the last 4 or 5 years. And you stack that on top of that 11%, now we're looking like a correction of more of about 30 or 35%. Something to keep in mind. I don't hear people talk about that as much, but I think it's important to keep in mind that, these correction numbers don't include those high inflation numbers that we've experienced over the last few years. But let's jump over to the inventory in the Southwest. Again, this graph goes back 2 years. These are total number of actives that were on the market in any given month. And this graph goes back to January of 2024. But last month we had a total of 352 properties on the market in the Southwest, Gulf Access homes. That's up just one from January's numbers. So again, we saw a very gradual spike at the end of the year as we got into the first couple of months of 2026. We always see that seasonal bump in inventory. So that's no big surprise. What was the big surprise is we didn't go up more. Because if you look last year, I mean, especially from December to January last year, we had a big spike. And actually, 12 months ago, if you look at February of 2025, this number was 469. So we've taken 117 properties off the market in the last 12 months, about 25% of the total inventory we've managed to take off the market here in just the last 12 months. So our inventory problems are receding pretty significantly. And we haven't really seen that big seasonal spike that we saw the last couple of years, really. So I fully expect we're probably about flattened out in terms of the total number of homes on the market in the Southwest, and we'll eventually start to come back down as we sell some more of these properties, as some of them come off the market and so forth. But about 25% reduction in inventory over the last year. And even if you take it back 2 years ago, the number was 378 in February of 2024. So we're still down 26, or about 7%. From where we were 2 years ago. So once again, all signs point to the recovery of this particular real estate market. We've kind of taken considerable amount of inventory off the market. The pricing correction that we've seen has slowed way down, and it really seems like everything is flattening out and preparing to move in the other direction. It just takes quite a long time for that to happen. And really the last thing that we see when one of these market turnarounds happens is the last thing we notice is the prices going up. So we're probably going to get 6 months into this swing the other way before we realize that we're back on the upward track in terms of pricing. But that pretty much wraps it up for the Southwest section of Cape Coral. Let's get up into my neck of the woods and let's talk about the Northwest section of Cape Coral. It's definitely an exciting time to be in the Northwest. Right, the Northwest section of Cape Coral. This is my neighborhood up there. I absolutely love the Northwest. If you've watched a lot of these videos, you know that I'm a big proponent of that area. There's a ton going on up there, a lot of new construction developments. And this is where we find the Gulf Access homes, the newest Gulf Access homes. The vast majority of the new construction Gulf Access homes that have come out of the ground, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, have been up in the Northwest. And as such, most of the properties up there are just newer properties. But let's dive into the numbers on this area. We'll start off, we don't see as many sales up there. There's still a lot of vacant lots up there, so there's going to be a lot of new construction continuing to happen in the Northwest section. You know, the Northwest, the only Gulf Access available up there is the one single Gulf Access system that's west of Burnt Store Road and north of Pine Island Road. So this is the section of the city that we're talking about right here. But let's look at the total number of sales over the last couple of years, broken down by month. Here's the graph going back to January 2024. So we sold 14 Gulf Access homes in February this year. That's up from January's number of 10. So we've had 24 total sales in the first 2 months of this year. And once again, we're kind of outpacing the last 2 years so far this year. You know, last year in January 2025, we only sold 7 that month, and February was 12, so 19 total in the first 2 months of 2025. First 2 months of 2024 was only 17, so, you know, we're selling about 5 or 6, 7 more this year so far, which is, in the grand scheme of things, considering we're only talking about 20 or so properties, is quite a bit. So we've got some healthy momentum in the Northwest, just like we've got some healthy momentum in the Southwest and the Southeast. But let's kind of compare that to the totals over the last few years. You know, last year was a strong year for the Northwest for Gulf Access homes. We sold 132 properties compared to 2024's number of 122. So we were up about 8.2% in 2025 from 2024's number. If you want to look at that like demand, that's a pretty significant increase in overall demand for Gulf Access real estate in the Northwest section of Cape Coral, about 8.2%. Going back to 2023, it was under 100. There was only 94 properties that sold up there in 2023. So we're heading in the right direction in terms of the demand, in terms of the total number of sales that we're seeing in this section of the city. And I think that's only going to continue to go up as, again, we get some more of these commercial developments going in up there, some more of the utility infrastructure gets up in there, because it's important to note, like I said, there's pros and cons to each one of these areas that we're talking about. In the Northwest section of Cape Coral, still the majority of that area up there, the homes are still on well and septic systems. A lot of them have whole house reverse osmosis system. So you pull the well water out of the ground, it goes through the water treatment, and you get some nice water quality in your house, especially if you have an RO system. But we don't have central utilities up there yet. We're supposed to get a good chunk of that area of the city, is supposed to get the central utilities in the next couple of years. But of course, that comes with its own challenges. They're going to tear the roads up to put the pipes in and all that, and then you're going to get hit with the assessments up there. But that all gets obviously priced out in the values up there. But let's just go through a couple more numbers real quick on these sales. I mentioned this is the newest area of the city up there in the Northwest. We're seeing the newest number of new construction properties, and 71% of those 132 sales last year were properties that were 20 years or newer. So 71% of the market up there, the homes are newer than 20 years old. And if you actually break that down even more, 61 of those 132 sales were 5 years old or newer. So almost half the market, 46% of the total number of sales that we've seen in the Northwest section of Cape Coral last year were basically brand new construction homes. So we're seeing a lot more of the sales up there are newer properties, and as such, that certain things get priced out with them. You've got, a little bit better insurance rates on some of these new construction properties. A lot of them have hurricane impact windows and doors, newer roofs. They're maybe built up to higher elevation standards, so you don't have as expensive when it comes to flood insurance and things like that. And that all kind of works into the overall pricing up there. So let's talk about the median price for the Northwest section of Cape Coral for Gulf access homes. Again, here's the graph going back 2 years in terms of the monthly median price. Once again, we don't have a big sample size in any given month. You're talking about 12 or 17 properties selling in any given month. This number is going to fluctuate quite a bit from month to month, but the median price last month in February 2026, $873,250, and that's up significantly from January's number of $770,000. And again, you kind of have to read between the lines, and we'll get into the yearly median price here in just a second. But if you just look 12 months ago in February of 2024, February 2025, this number was 875,000. 885,000 was February of 2024. So at least when you take those numbers, there's not a lot of movement there, but you kind of have to average all of these out and kind of look at the broader year-long median price, and that's what I'm going to do next. Let's take a look at this graph over the course of the last few years. So whereas the Southeast and the Southwest, those Gulf access prices kind of peaked out in 2022, for whatever reason, the Gulf access homes in the Northwest section of Cape Coral, in terms of price, peaked out in 2023. So check out this graph. 2022's number, the median price back then was $858,500. And then it jumped up in 2023 to $937,500. I think that entirely has to do with the fact that people kind of figured out that location was there and it was really up and coming and things like that. And so a lot of people built brand new construction, beautiful luxury homes. In some case, $1 million+, $2 million+ homes in some cases up there. And so we see those values go up just naturally because it costs more to have a new construction luxury home up there versus a resale down that was built in 2002 or something in the Southwest, or something built in 1975 in the Southeast. So I think that was really the entire reason why these prices kind of jumped from 2022 to 2023. It had more to do with the new construction going in that area up there versus the actual market going up. I think if you looked at the resale numbers, especially for older properties up there, they probably would have peaked out in 2022 and then came down in 2023. But let's just look at these numbers all together. So again, 2022's number, 858,500. It jumps up to 937,500 in 2023, and then it comes back down 882,500 in 2024 and 850 this past year. So we're talking about an overall price correction from 2023's peak, the overall price correction of about 87,500, or about 9.3%. So still a little bit less than even the Southwest, and certainly about half as much in terms of a price reduction as we saw in the Southeast, where it was a 20% correction since 2022. So I think that entirely has to do with the fact that the insurance costs are a little bit better for these new construction properties, and they don't have to price that out as much as they do in a 1970 built home in the Southeast section of Cape Coral, where the flood insurance is going to be more the homeowner's insurance is going to be more. All of that affects affordability, and so the pricing necessarily would have to come down more in the Southeast for those older properties than they would in the Southwest or the Northwest for these new construction homes. So I think that's pretty interesting, but let's look at the inventory. Inventory kind of matches what we're seeing in the other sections of the city. There's not as many properties up here, but here's the 2-year graph for the total number of active listings on the market at any given month. And we had 143 last month. It's up very slightly from January, where we had 141. But again, we peaked out in terms of inventory last year, around this time last year in 2025. And actually, February of 2025, we had 183 properties on the market. So we've taken 40 off in the last 12 months. And again, that represents about 22%. So we've reduced the inventory in the northwest section of Cape Coral for these Gulf access homes by 22% in just the last 12 months. This actually peaked out in March of 2025 at 188, so it's even more than that from the peak back then. So made a lot of progress on the inventory front, and again, we didn't see this big ramp up that we did last couple of years going into November, December, January. It ticked up a little bit, as it always does seasonally, but not nearly to the degree that it did last year and even in 2024. And in 2024, the inventory of February 2024 was 172, so we're still down almost 17% from where we were 2 years ago. And once again, why I think it's a big sign, yet another sign pointing to this particular market cycle making a very slow turnaround. And I think we're starting to flatten off these inventory numbers. We may get a little bit more as we get into March and April, but it's probably going to stay pretty darn flat before once we get into the early summer months, it's going to start diving back down again. And I fully expect to see fresh lows in terms of the inventory, at least compared to the last few years. I think we got a ways to go before we get back to the extremely low inventory era back in 2020 and 2021. But nevertheless, we're making significant progress, and the pricing is seems to be flattening out overall. And it seems like we're making this kind of slow, gradual turn in the other direction for this particular market cycle. But that pretty much wraps things up for the Northwest. And that's really all I have coverage for you today in terms of these Gulf access home numbers. I really hope you enjoyed this video, even if it wasn't too entertaining. At least you got some really, really great numbers, and it kind of puts you in a better perspective of what the different Gulf access home markets look like in these different areas. And certainly if you are interested in Gulf access real estate in the city of Cape Coral, my phone number is right there on the screen. You can call, text, or email me anytime. If you have a property and you're watching this video because you're trying to stay on top of what the numbers look like because you're going to sell that property in the near future, I would also love to hear from you as well. I've got a really great brand new listing coming on the market, direct Gulf access, here next week. I'm going to be covering a video on that probably next week, and I can't wait to show that to you because we got a really, really solid price in the Southeast for that property, and it's got some really, really great features on it. But thank you so much for being here. Again, if I can do anything for you whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out, call, text, email me anytime. I love hearing from folks that watch these videos. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already subscribed, and do me a favor, if you did enjoy this, you got something out of it, hit that like button while you're at it. Just helps me out, helps this channel out. But thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next video here in just a few days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.